Don't talk to her. She can't even hear you. Those were the first words everyone heard when Thomas Marwick, the famously arrogant billionaire with ice in his veins and steel in his voice, stepped into the tiny family diner on the corner of Willow Street. The diner was usually noisy, clinking plates, laughter, old songs playing on the dusty speaker. But the moment Thomas walked in, everything fell silent. He had that kind of presence. Cold, sharp, like he owned the air everyone breathed. Beside him stood his daughter, Lily, a fragile, soft-faced 8-year-old girl with big, curious eyes and a tiny hearing aid tucked behind her left ear. Her small fingers gripped the edge of her father's coat as if the world around her was too loud, even if she couldn't hear it fully. She scanned the diner timidly, as if trying to understand the space, the faces, the atmosphere. But what she saw most were people staring, not at her smile, not at her innocence, but at her hearing device. People always stared. Thomas snapped his fingers sharply, pulling everyone's attention back to him. "Someone bring us the healthiest thing on the menu," he ordered, not even looking at the waitstaff. "She can't afford junk. And don't try speaking to her. My daughter is deaf. She won't get it." His tone wasn't protective. It was dismissive, almost embarrassed. Lily lowered her head. At the counter stood Maya, a young black waitress with soft eyes and a warm, gentle smile. She had been watching the entire scene unfold, calmly, quietly, with a kind of empathy that made her glow. She noticed how Lily held her hands close to her chest. She noticed how her eyes moved, searching for someone who didn't look at her with pity. She noticed how Thomas's words sank into the little girl's heart like stones. Maya didn't feel annoyed. She didn't feel intimidated. She felt something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. She understood that look in Lily's eyes. The look of a child who wanted connection, but didn't know how to get it. Thomas finally saw Maya watching them. He raised an eyebrow sharply. "Hey," he scoffed. "Didn't you hear me? Don't waste your time trying to talk to her." The customers held their breaths, waiting for Maya to react. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't argue. She didn't snap back. Instead, Maya wiped her hands on her apron, straightened her posture, and slowly walked toward the table. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with purpose. She stopped right in front of Lily. Thomas crossed his arms. "Are you ignoring me now?" Maya didn't respond to him. She gently lowered herself to Lily's eye level and smiled. A soft, warm smile that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. Lily blinked. She didn't back away. She didn't hide behind her father. Her eyes softened, curious. People around the diner leaned forward slightly. Something was happening, something unexpected. Maya lifted her hands, slowly, gracefully, deliberately, and then she did something that froze the entire diner. She began to speak to Lily in sign language. Her fingers moved with confidence, smooth, expressive, alive with meaning. "Hi," Maya signed. "My name is Maya. How are you today?" Lily's reaction was instant, like someone had lit a spark inside her. Her mouth fell slightly open. Her eyes widened like blooming flowers. She gasped a silent, breathy sound, then smiled so brightly it warmed the whole diner. She lifted her own hands, trembling with excitement, and signed back softly. I'm good." Her little fingers stumbled through some signs, but she tried. She truly tried. Thomas's jaw tightened. What are you doing?" he stammered, completely thrown off. "How do you?" Maya glanced at him politely, but firmly, before looking back at Lily. "I used to teach children with hearing disabilities," she said gently, "before I worked here." Lily's fingers flew again, signing fast, excited, overflowing with happiness she'd kept inside for too long. She told Maya her favorite color. She told her she liked drawing stars. She told her she loved pancakes. Maya laughed, a soft musical laugh, and signed everything back, matching Lily's energy. Customers began whispering. "Look at her face. She's never looked so happy. That waitress, wow." Thomas watched his daughter, as though he were seeing her for the first time. He swallowed hard. "You don't need to do that," he said stiffly. "She doesn't need signs. She needs structure, doctors, discipline." Maya stood up slowly, meeting his eyes with calm strength. "With respect, sir," she said softly. "She needs something else too." "What?" he asked, voice sharp. Maya looked down at Lily, who was watching her with hope stretched across her tiny face, then back at Thomas. "She needs someone who listens." Her words didn't echo, but they might as well have. They cut through the air, cut through the silence, cut through Thomas's armor. For the first time, the billionaire seemed unsure, unsteady, almost fragile. He looked at Lily, truly looked, and saw something he hadn't noticed in years. A child who was starving for connection. A child who wanted to speak in her own way. A child who wasn't broken at all, just unheard. Maya reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. And the little girl leaned into her touch like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to understand her. Thomas stood there frozen, and everyone in the diner knew. A single waitress had just done something no amount of money, doctors, or tutors had ever done. She had made Lily feel seen. And Thomas? He didn't know it yet, but this moment was about to change everything. Maya placed the plates gently on the table. A warm stack of pancakes for Lily, a perfectly arranged salad for Thomas. But instead of doing what every other waitress usually did when the billionaire barked orders, she didn't step back. She didn't retreat. She didn't shrink. Instead, she lowered herself slowly, gracefully, until she was crouched right beside Lily's chair, meeting the little girl at eye level. This alone shocked the diner. No one ever got that close to Thomas Marwick's daughter. People were usually too scared, or too confused, or too uncomfortable to try. But Maya? She didn't look scared at all. If anything, she looked at peace, like she understood something the rest of the world didn't. Then, in a moment so soft it felt like the entire diner had taken one breath together, Maya lifted her hands. Her fingers curved gently, her palms faced outward. And then she began speaking, not with her voice, but with her hands. In sign language, slowly, fluidly, beautifully. It was like watching a silent dance, delicate, expressive, full of emotion. Thomas blinked hard, as if trying to understand what he was seeing. Lily froze. The fork in her tiny hand slipped and landed softly on her plate. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. But her eyes, her beautiful, deep eyes, widened with a spark that no one had seen in a very, very long time. The diner went still. People paused mid-bite. Conversations cut off halfway. The air itself felt like it was holding still, waiting. Maya completed her sentence with a gentle smile. "Hi, my name is Maya. How are you today?" Every movement of her fingers was clear and confident. Not hesitant, not unsure. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't pretending. She knew the language of Lily's world. Lily's lips parted. Her breath shook. And then, slowly at first, then faster as excitement filled her, she lifted her own hands. Her fingers trembled with eagerness. She stumbled over a few signs, corrected herself, and tried again. She signed back. I am okay. Hi." Her hands were small. Her signs were not perfect. But her face, her entire face, lit up with joy. It was like someone had turned on a light inside her chest. A spark, a glow, a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Being understood. A soft gasp left someone in the back of the diner. Another customer covered her mouth. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen door, eyes wide. No one had ever seen Lily communicate like this. Not here. Not anywhere. Thomas stared at the scene as if he were watching something impossible happen right in front of him. His usually stone-cold expression cracked, confusion mixing with disbelief. What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice unsteady. "How do you?" But his question trailed off because even he could hear how foolish it sounded. Maya turned her head slightly toward him, her expression calm and gentle, the kind of calm that comes from real understanding, not arrogance. "I used to teach children with hearing disabilities before this diner hired me," she said with a soft smile. It wasn't bragging. It wasn't defiance. It was simply the truth. But the truth hit Thomas harder than he expected. Lily laughed. Not quietly. Not politely. A real laugh, bright and soft, full of life, bubbled out of her. It startled the entire diner. Some customers froze mid-chew. Others leaned in closer. The cook nearly dropped the spatula in his hand. It was the first time anyone in that diner had heard Lily make such a joyful sound. Thomas's jaw tightened instantly. That sound, that laughter. It wasn't something he was used to hearing. Or maybe he had been too busy, too distracted, too distant to notice. And now a stranger, a waitress, had brought it out of her in seconds. Thomas straightened his back, trying to recover his usual dominance. "I pay for the best doctors," he said defensively. "She doesn't need signs. She needs discipline." His voice was sharp, forceful. The voice of a man who used power when he felt fear creeping up behind him. But Maya didn't react the way people usually did around Thomas Marwick. She didn't shrink. She didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She simply breathed in softly and looked him directly in the eyes. "With respect, sir," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "She needs connection." The words felt like they carried weight. They settled into the air. They pressed into Thomas's chest. They rolled through the diner like a quiet truth no one had been bold enough to say aloud. Lily's hands waved quickly, signing something new to Maya. Excited, urgent bursts of movement. "She's telling me she likes the pancakes," Maya translated with a smile. "And she wants to know if she can come here again." Thomas looked at Lily, his daughter. For years, he had paid for elite schools, therapies, tutors, doctors, everything money could buy. But he had never seen her glow like this. Never seen her communicate this freely. Never seen her so alive. Yet here she was opening up to a waitress with gentle hands and a warm heart. The billionaire swallowed hard. For the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. He didn't have control. He didn't even have a plan. He only had a question he wasn't courageous enough to ask. "Why is my daughter happier with a stranger than with me?" Maya saw the conflict in his eyes, but she didn't say anything more. She simply stayed beside Lily, her hands moving with grace, her smile encouraging, her presence steady. And Lily, sweet, quiet Lily, signed story after story with joy bubbling out of her like sunlight peeking through storm clouds. For the first time in years, she was talking, really talking. And Thomas? Thomas Marwick, the man who believed he could fix anything with money, stood there frozen. Because he realized something terrifying. He didn't know how to reach his own daughter. But Maya did. And that truth shook him more than anything he had ever faced. Minutes passed, but inside the little diner, time felt different, slower, softer, almost sacred. Lily's hands moved nonstop. Story after story. Emotion after emotion. Every sign she made carried years of silence, finally breaking free. Her smile kept growing, small at first, then wider, brighter, bursting across her face with a joy that made even strangers tear up. Her tiny shoulders relaxed. Her eyes sparkled. Her fingers danced clumsily, but beautifully through the air. And Maya, patient and gentle, translated every sign with a warm glow in her eyes. Thomas sat stiffly at first, hands folded on the table, trying to pretend he wasn't affected. But he couldn't hide the way his eyes softened with every new thing he learned about his daughter. "She likes stars," Maya translated, her smile deepening as she watched Lily sign with excitement. "She wants to be an astronaut someday." Thomas frowned, confusion twisting across his face. "She never told me that," he muttered. Maya looked at him, not judgmental, not superior, just honest. "Maybe she tried," she said softly. "Maybe you didn't know how to listen." The words didn't shout. They didn't accuse. But they landed like a stone in Thomas's chest. His breath caught. His chin tightened. He stared at the table for a moment, feeling something he wasn't used to feeling. The truth. He turned his eyes back to Lily, really looked at her. And in that moment, he noticed things he'd somehow missed for 8 entire years. The way her fingers fluttered when she was excited. The way her eyes lit up when someone understood her. The way she leaned forward, soaking up every sign Maya taught her like she'd been starving for this kind of connection. A quiet ache formed in his throat. He had never seen her like this. Not once. Not after all the expensive tutors he hired. Not after sending her to the best private schools. Not even after dragging her to countless doctors and specialists. He had poured money into her life. But not time, not warmth, not understanding. Lily's laugh, soft, breathy, pure, pulled him from his thoughts. Maya had just taught her the sign for silly, and Lily kept repeating it, giggling every time. Maya laughed too, her shoulders shaking, her eyes glowing with a mixture of joy and nostalgia. Customers around the diner smiled quietly, some wiping tears, others pretending they weren't moved. And for the first time in a long time, Thomas didn't interrupt, didn't snap, didn't bark orders. He just watched. Eventually, curiosity cracked through his pride, and he spoke, his voice softer than anyone in the diner had ever heard. "Why did you stop teaching?" He hesitated, almost embarrassed by how fragile the question sounded coming from him. "I mean, you're clearly good at it." Maya froze. Her hands stopped moving. Her eyes lowered. Her breath caught in her throat. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Even Lily seemed to sense the shift. She lowered her hands and watched Maya with quiet concern. Finally, Maya inhaled shakily. "My little brother," she paused, swallowing hard, "was deaf." The diners who'd been listening pretended to look away, but leaned closer. Thomas sat straighter. Maya continued, voice barely above a whisper. "I taught him signs myself. Every day, every night. He was younger than me, and he looked up to me for everything." Her eyes softened with a memory that was both beautiful and painful. "He loved stars too," she said with a sad smile. "Just like Lily." Thomas glanced at Lily, then back at Maya. "What happened to him?" he asked gently. Maya's jaw trembled. Her hands gripped her apron tightly. "He got sick," she whispered. "And he passed away 2 years ago." The entire diner went still. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fryer in the kitchen and a quiet sniffle from someone in the next booth. Maya blinked rapidly, trying to keep her composure. Her voice cracked, just slightly, but enough to cut through the air like a thin line of heartbreak. "After he died," she exhaled shakily, "I couldn't teach anymore. Every classroom reminded me of him. Every child reminded me of how I failed to save him." Thomas's eyes softened, a flicker of empathy slipping through his usual hard exterior. Maya looked down at her hands. "And now," she whispered, "I serve tables instead." Her shoulders slumped, not with shame, but with the weight of a grief she had carried alone for far too long. Lily reached out, touching Maya's arm gently, her way of saying she understood, even if she couldn't speak the words aloud. Maya gave her a soft smile, brushing a thumb across Lily's knuckles. Thomas watched this simple moment of affection, and something inside him shifted. For the first time in his entire life, at least the part of his life he allowed the world to see, he felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel. Guilt. The guilt of not knowing his daughter. The guilt of silencing her without meaning to. The guilt of thinking money could fix everything. And beside that guilt, another emotion rose quietly. Respect. Respect for a woman who had suffered more than he could imagine, yet still had the strength to kneel beside a child she had never met and give her the gift of understanding. Maya wiped her eyes gently and forced a smile. "Your daughter is very smart," she whispered. "She just needed someone to speak her language." Thomas's throat tightened. For once, the billionaire had no words, only the truth. And it humbled him. The clock on the diner wall ticked softly, unnoticed by everyone. What was supposed to be a quick meal had turned into something deeper, something none of them expected. Eventually, Maya checked the time and stood up reluctantly. "I should let you both finish your meal," she said softly. "I have other tables to serve." But Lily didn't want her to go. Her eyes followed Maya with sadness, her fingers twitching like she wanted to sign more, say more, learn more. Thomas cleared his throat, pushing back his chair as he rose to his feet. He smoothed his suit jacket, a habit he had whenever he felt uncomfortable, and reached into his wallet. He pulled out several crisp bills, far more than necessary. Billionaire tips were legendary, even if they came with arrogance. But before he could speak, before he could thank or dismiss or control, a tiny hand gently tugged at the sleeve of his coat. "Lily." She shook her head urgently, lips pressed together with meaning. Her eyes shimmered, filled with something Thomas hadn't seen in them before. Hope. She signed slowly at first, hesitant, careful, wanting to be understood. I want to talk like Maya. Her fingers weren't perfect. Some shapes trembled. But the message was clear. Thomas froze. Completely froze. In 8 years, Lily had never initiated communication like that. Never expressed a desire. Never asked for anything of her own choosing. She had always followed the programs he set, the therapies he approved, the schedules he created. This was the first time she declared what she wanted. Maya watched her with soft, proud eyes. She stepped closer and translated gently for Thomas. She wants to learn sign language properly, Maya said. And she wants you to learn too. The room went silent. Utterly silent. The customers, the cooks, the families eating lunch, all of them paused, breath held. Eyes fixed on the billionaire, who always walked like he owned every room he entered. Thomas Marwick. The man with power, pride, and money. The man who commanded boardrooms and intimidated CEOs. Suddenly looked small. Not weak. Just human. He stared at Lily, chest tightening, throat closing. Her hands had never seemed so expressive. Her eyes had never seemed so bright. Her desire had never been clearer. And for the first time in his life, his real life, not the one dressed in wealth and power, Thomas felt something unfamiliar curl inside him. Fear. Not of failure. Not of embarrassment. But of not being enough for the tiny girl who trusted him. His voice cracked before it even left his mouth. I don't know how, he whispered. And those 5 words were perhaps the most honest he had ever spoken. Maya stepped forward, her expression soft and full of warmth. You can learn, she said. If you want to. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't expectation. It was an invitation. A door. A chance. The billionaire swallowed hard. He looked at his daughter again. Truly looked. Lily watched him carefully, hands pulled close to her chest, as though bracing herself for disappointment. Her entire future, her hope, hung in that single moment. Thomas's face twisted, his jaw trembling. He opened his mouth, closed it again, took a shaky breath. And then something happened that no one, absolutely no one, expected. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic tears. Not loud, messy sobs. But silent tears. The kind that come from years of emotions bottled up. The kind that escape from a heart slowly cracking open. The kind that show the truth he never dared admit. He loved his daughter, but he didn't know how to reach her until now. A tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it, didn't hide it, didn't pretend it wasn't there. Then he knelt. Yes, the billionaire actually knelt, so he could be level with Lily. He placed his hands gently over hers, guiding them down so she could see his face clearly. And with a voice raw, trembling, disarmed of all arrogance, he whispered the words he hadn't spoken once in 8 long years. I'm sorry. The diner felt the sentence. Every heart in the room tightened. Some people turned away, hiding their emotional reactions. But Lily didn't hesitate. She reached forward with both arms and wrapped them around her father's neck. A hug. A real hug. Not forced. Not asked for. Not guided by therapists or schedules. A hug born from understanding. From connection. A hug she initiated. Thomas's chin quivered as he held her close, closing his eyes for a moment that felt like the world had paused. He exhaled shakily, his hand gently resting on the back of her head. Maya turned away to give them privacy, but even she couldn't hide the glimmer of emotion in her eyes. The entire diner felt it, like warmth melting frost, like light breaking through clouds, like a silent promise forming in the space between father and daughter. They were going to learn each other, together. Thomas pulled back slightly, wiping his cheek with the back of his hand. When he looked up at Maya, something had changed in his eyes. The arrogance had faded. The coldness had melted. What remained was gratitude and respect, so deep it almost startled him. I want to learn, he said quietly. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a command. It was a vow. Maya nodded with a soft, encouraging smile. Then I'll teach you both, she whispered. And right there, in a small family diner on a quiet street, something extraordinary began. A new chapter. A new language. A new bond. Not built on wealth, not built on power, but on understanding. And that moment didn't just warm the diner. It changed lives. Forever. 1 week later, the diner felt different. Not because anything had changed in the furniture or the colors or the menu, but because the people inside were waiting, secretly hoping, that the billionaire and his little girl might walk in again. And then, the bell over the door chimed. Everyone looked up. It was Thomas. But not the Thomas they knew from before. Not the man who carried pride like armor and arrogance like a weapon. This Thomas walked in slowly, almost shyly. He held a notebook under his arm, a pen clipped neatly at the top. His expensive suit was still there, but the coldness that usually wrapped around him like ice, gone. Lily stood beside him, wearing a tiny smile that told the whole diner one thing. Something had changed. When Thomas reached the counter, he didn't snap his fingers. He didn't bark orders. He didn't even speak at first. He simply asked, in the softest voice anyone had ever heard from him, "Is Maya here?" The staff exchanged surprised looks, then called her from the back. Maya stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron, unaware of what she was about to witness. "Mr. Marwick, you're back." But Thomas didn't answer with words. He raised his hands, trembling, unsure, clumsy, and signed, "Thank you for giving me my daughter." The diner froze. Maya's eyes instantly filled with tears, because she knew what those signs cost him: pride, ego, fear, everything he had built his entire life on. And Lily? Lily practically flew toward Maya and wrapped her arms around her. The entire diner lit up with applause. Not because a billionaire had walked in, but because a father had finally shown up. The transformation begins. From that day on, Thomas wasn't just a customer. He was a student. Every afternoon, after his business meetings ended, he would drive back to the little diner with Lily. Not to show off, not to judge the food, but to learn. To learn the language of his daughter's heart. He practiced every single sign Maya taught him, sometimes messing up so badly that Lily would giggle uncontrollably. The same Lily who used to avoid eye contact and stay silent in public now laughed so openly that customers would turn just to see her smile. Thomas took notes like a man preparing for the most important exam of his life. Every evening, his chauffeur would open the car door, but Thomas would wave him away. He walked out holding Lily's hand, something he had never done before. He let her lead. Sometimes she led him toward Maya. Sometimes toward the counter to order her favorite pancakes. Sometimes she simply wanted to sit in the booth and practice new signs with her father. And Thomas followed every time. Because, for the first time in 8 years, he wasn't leading a company. He was learning to be a dad. Something beautiful happened to Maya, too. Maya had spent 2 years hiding her gift, locking away the part of her that once loved teaching. Her brother's death had broken her heart slowly, painfully, quietly. But the day Lily signed her first full sentence with joy shining through her eyes, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And then Thomas said something unexpected one afternoon. "You're not just teaching my daughter. You're teaching me how to be human." Maya had no words. She only smiled, a smile filled with the kind of warmth that could melt years of grief. Soon more families began coming to the diner, asking Maya to teach their children signs. Not officially, not for money, just out of kindness. Maya started saying yes. Her heart was healing, one small student at a time. Thomas changes more than just his schedule. The arrogant billionaire, who once believed emotions were a weakness, now spent his nights watching sign language tutorials instead of business reports. He changed company policies, adding support programs for employees with disabilities. He donated to schools that lacked inclusive learning materials. He even hired a sign language instructor for his mansion staff, so Lily would never feel alone in her own home again. People called him generous, but Thomas would shake his head and say, "I'm just making up for lost time." The final moment everyone remembers. One quiet Sunday morning, the diner was half full when Thomas and Lily walked in. Lily ran ahead to Maya, signing excitedly. Maya knelt down, matching Lily's speed with a smile. Thomas approached behind them, watching with soft, grateful eyes. He waited until Lily ran to play near the window. Then he signed slowly, clearly with no hesitation. "I will never let my daughter feel unheard again." Maya covered her mouth with her hand as tears rolled down her cheek. Thomas gently signed one more sentence. "Thank you for teaching me how to listen." And in that small family diner, among the smell of coffee and pancakes, the walls held a story that would be told for years. A billionaire walked in with walls around his heart, and a waitress broke them with kindness. A little deaf girl who once hid behind silence now spoke louder than anyone in the room, without making a sound. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person who cares. One person who sees what others ignore. One person who listens to a child who cannot hear. The arrogant billionaire walked in broken, but walked out as a father. And it all started with one brave waitress who chose compassion over convenience.